here. There's a lot of England fans who would love to see you full on the white shirt. Is that ever going to happen? Was that ever going to happen?
No. I don't think that's never going to happen, no. That's not a question.
And what's the reason that you're so committed to Ireland?
I'm Irish. There's nothing else to say. I've been asked that question a few times, but no, I'm Irish.
Evan Ferguson being asked a joke question by a TalkSport interview. Now, the TalkSport interview, I have to say, been on with him, I know him, he's a good guy. He was trying for a wind-up, he was trying for a joke. By trying to justify his little joke, his little aside, his little kind of like, come on, don't worry, we're only going to joke anyway. It made it all worse because Irish people are sick of seeing players that we think belong to us ending up playing for England, especially when we talk about Jack Grealish and Declan Rice. Doesn't matter the fact that both of them were born in England. Doesn't matter the fact that Jack Grealish played Gaelic football in Croke Park. Doesn't matter that Declan Rice, who was putting out tweets about the IRA, doesn't make a difference. They're both English boys. They chose who they want to do. Could we say to our own children, no, you can't play for this country so you can make more money? Of course we wouldn't. We'd be backing them all the way. No matter how big a patriots we are, we still want our kids to go and make the most of their careers and make the most money they can to set us up. So our pensionable age is easier. However, this kind of question, this pushing that's going on with Evan Ferguson, because only a young guy, is continuous. It's like a very heavy rain that just won't stop until basically the guy flops, gets broken down physically, mentally, or basically is no longer of any use to the English national team. Now, to speak about this, we're going to bring through arch Irish nationalist and Irish Republican, very much on that green side of the fence. And she's going to tell us why it irritates Irish people so much to hear this kind of stuff, even in a joking manner, even when we see it made fun of all over the place. Why does it annoy Irish people so much? Isolt, why does that get up our wicks so much?
I'm so glad that you caught me right now when I don't have my balaclava and green jersey on. So I think why it annoys us is partly because of the fact that we try to go with the granny rule a lot when it suits us. Because we've talked about Jack Grealish, we talked about Damien Rice. They aren't Irish by birth, and I'll come back to this in a second, but like they haven't grown up here. Whereas there's a slight irony in the fact that we're like, hold on, that's an Irish fella who has never once expressed any interest in being English because he's from Meath. No one from Meath has an interest in being from anywhere other than Meath. They get sensitive if you tell them they're Dubs. So Evan is very much an Irish fella who was probably his greatest ambition in life is actually not to be a footballer. It's probably to play for Meath in a team where he wins an All-Ireland, which isn't realistic. So I'm glad he's applied his trade elsewhere. But I think there is a huge irony in the fact that Irish people get so sensitive about this because we also do play the immigration game where we're very keen to get players in who are not Irish by birth, but Irish by connection. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think and maybe I'm veering entirely onto a different and wrong answer here, but I think by virtue of the fact that we're becoming more of a multinational and global society in Ireland, we're going to have people who live here who might identify with other teams or nationalities if it comes to international performance. So we might have players here who might go, actually, we have a huge Nigerian population. I'd prefer to play for the Nigerian national team, or I'd prefer to play for the English national team or the French national team. I started with Nigerian because we obviously have a huge Nigerian immigrant population here, or the Polish team. So we can't then become sensitive to the fact that we may have players who may, like Damien Rice, he's actually English, wanting to play with the English team. Okay, that's fine. Evan Ferguson is different in the sense of Evan Ferguson is Irish. He happens to work in England. That doesn't necessarily make him English. But I think we do need, I suppose, there's an Irish sensitivity to the fact that anything good that's Irish, we feel the English want, which is just a historic 600 to 800 years of feeling that way about things. But I think there also needs to be a pragmatic approach, because if this was rugby or another sport, we may view it differently. Like, one of the best English cricketers of the last decade, if not longer, is an Irishman. But that's because he couldn't make a career in the Irish cricket team on an international stage like he can in England. And he is of that level that he needs to be able to do that. Owen Morgan, obviously. So I think we need to be a little less precious about nationality when it shouldn't be seen as an insult to the country. But I think with the likes of Evan Ferguson, the reason it's insulting is it's basically saying you work in England, you've never expressed any interest in playing internationally for England, you have no international connection with England. Because you're good, should we just assume you'd prefer to play with England? Because that seems logical. And that's the thing. Like, he's obviously a proud Irishman, a proud Meath man. He's happy to play with a team that are probably not beneath his ability, that's unfair. If he was to play on a team of a higher caliber internationally, he would probably shine more because it brings up his level. When he plays with Ireland, it's a huge amount of pressure because we expect him to drag the national team to a level. But by the same token, he's never expressed an interest in playing for anyone else.
One thing I know, his mom was born in London, so they do kind of say that there is that connection as well.
Yeah, but he's from Meath. Like, let's face it, they
No,
don't cross the border easily.
No. I agree with that. And one thing I will point out that it's Declan Rice, not Damien Rice.
Okay,
Damien Rice is very Irish.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
Damien Rice is very Irish.
I was listening to Cannonball earlier. Please do not judge me.
Okay, so just so we know, so we stay legally okay. Look, you're dead right, because look, if we look at the rugby team and some of our best players, we bought them in. We brought them in from South Africa,
again,
from the Pacific.
There's also a factor of where you live, where you work, and that's kind of the thing I was trying to say about Evan. It is about where you live and where you work, and that is a huge factor. And with rugby, they've changed their rules because they're trying to accept the fact that we live in a world where people move countries, they move continents, and we need to be accepting of that. But I also think we need to kind of have a bit of respect to, how do I say this in a nice way, players who are from a country that may not equate to their level of talent. They could play in what could be considered a better international standard, but they're happy where they are. Owen Morgan is a great example of a player who I have no issue with Owen Morgan playing for England because he is an exceptional player. And at the time, he wouldn't have got any of the games or level of competition in Ireland.
And let's put it this way: he won a World Cup. He captained England to their first World Cup 4 years ago. Yeah. Now, the fact that England flopped this time around doesn't make a difference. He's still
very different tournament and very different. Like, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think it's everything from the pitches to the whole. Everything around it is very, very difficult.
The heat is a huge factor.
And I think just England, it came at the wrong time for them. That's what I believe. That's another thing. Before we let you go for a moment, because you'll be back on in a few minutes. For Ireland, for a long time, as you mentioned, the grinding rule, we got in players who most of the time, 99% of the time, wouldn't get their game for England. Most of them were not able to get their game for Scotland, like Ray Houghton, for example. Very good players, but not at that level. So should we, as we look at Irish people, many Lithuanians, Poles, Nigerians, Maltese, other people from different nations who can then go off, we can't begrudge them, but should there be a way, for example, like in GAA, you play for your local club, you play for your local county, and that's it. Should we try to enforce that rule in soccer as well?
I don't think so. So I suppose the other thing, when we mentioned those players, Ray Houghton, the likes of the English players who went abroad, they were part of diaspora. And I suppose we see that with Polish communities here in Ireland as well. When you go away from home, you sometimes become, it's like, I suppose, great example, what's his name? Gino D'Acampo, the Italian chef who lives in England. Every time a new series of his TV shows, he sounds more and more Italian every time around. And it's the same as sometimes you will have friends and family who go abroad, and like, you'll speak to them, whether it be like back in the day it was a phone call, now it's FaceTime, or when they arrive home, and they sound more Irish than they ever did, because it's part of that. When you go abroad, you want to identify more with your homeland. And I think part of the thing of Irish people when they've gone abroad is those grandchildren, great-grandchildren, we see it in the Rose Tree, who identify more with Ireland and their Irish culture than they do with anywhere else. We see it with the Italian Americans. they say they're Italian first, and you're kind of going, well, you're 5 generations down the line. So I think that's the thing with it. And I suppose if that were to happen with Irish player or Irish born Poles and Lithuanians, can we really begrudge them that? Because we've done that every time we've traveled. So I think it's a case of being a bit more able to recognize that we live in, again, much more multicultural and global society. So if people recognize more with a certain country, there's swings and roundabouts. It balances itself out. Unfortunately for us, it balances itself out in the sense that some of the talented fellas don't want to come home.
Well, that's it. And I mean, also, it is found that the first generation moves away. They will most of the time try to almost leave behind a nationality, but their kids will pick it up and the grandkids pick it up stronger. So we see, for example, South Asians, your Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, Indians, who are in India, who are the second generation or third generation, suddenly they become more aware of their heritage. And of course, our Irish people, I mean, and I said this before, Andrew and I spoke about it before as well, Ireland need to look towards Europe more for football talent, for example, because the English, it's already, the generations are removed.
I think Brexit will change that hugely because it has meant there's a huge influence on when players could go abroad. And I think that will obviously change the age of players leaving to travel, and it will mean that there'll need to be more development here or development in conjunction with European teams. And that will obviously have a huge knock-on effect. But by the same token, I think we just we need to be not less focused on nationality, but we need to be less insulted when people don't want to identify with being Irish, because we're living in a world where people can identify with whatever and whoever they want to be. And we need to treat nationality as, yes, you should be, if you don't want to participate for a national team, don't force someone, because part of participation for a national team is pride in it. Because if you're playing with the Irish national team, we're not winning a World Cup anytime soon in football. So you have to want to be there to participate. And that's the thing. If you're playing with the English national team, you have that potential. So I understand it. You're there to be a winner. You're not with Ireland. No offence.
And that will say goodbye to Iseult for just one moment. She'll stay there with us in the background in our waiting room. Come back in just a moment. But we have something that I think that Andrew Flint is going to cry about. Maybe with joy, maybe with sadness, maybe with pure frustration, anger, but I do expect tears. So enjoy this couple of minutes of absolute fan fiction before we come back with Andrew Flint. But the final guys you saw in that video, bald, black glasses, is a person brought in to overhaul British cycling. He did it so well under the tutelage of a man who never saw, never heard, or never spoke any evil, even though he was a major race commissioner in the dirtiest eras of cycling. He brought in Dave Brailsford, who got knighted, to turn around British cycling, who then went into Team Sky. And through marginal gains, that means using very strong, first, he used nice pillows, pineapple juice, 2 kilo poops. Yes, the cyclists had to poop 2 kilos a day to make them actually faster on the bikes. There you go. Well, I guess it works. And also all these other marginal gains, 1% here, 1% there, all added up to being able to fly ahead of the opposition. Now, no one said that he did anything wrong. No, of course he didn't. He said, we're not going to use anybody who's been involved in doping, except Gert Leiners, who's a doctor who's involved in doping. We're not going to use any needles whatsoever, except the needles that were administered by British cycling doctors and Team Sky doctors. And we're not going to use anything bad, including motors, even though some of the cyclists were involved with motor doping. We're not going to use any sort of dirty cyclists, but they've used dirty cyclists, and so on and so forth. He was even hauled in by Westminster to answer questions which he couldn't answer about who brought drugs here, who brought drugs there. He didn't know. And of course, the Richard Freeman, a doctor who took the fall for it all, destroyed 3 laptops to make sure that the information that he had kept very, very well from his days, all the way back from when he was working with Bolton Wanderers and players, all the way through, that were all destroyed. Jim Ratcliffe owns Team Ineos, which is now Team Sky. He has heavily backed some of the more questionable things, including like world record attempts on marathon and so on. And he's going to bring in David Brailsford and manager people in with him to overhaul Manchester United if he gets his hands on the club, which has been pushed left, right, and centre. Now, he's not going to kick the Glazers out. He's going to leave them in place. And apparently, he's going to fire all these players. He's going to kick out all these players. He's going to clean the place up. But anyone who knows his main business knows that he cleans up very, very little and leaves a big mess always behind. Andrew Flint, are you looking forward to this man coming in to take over your club? The club that your dad has supported, a club that's been bequeathed to you by your dad. Are you ready for the rat?
Well, Manchester United needs a lot more than just marginal gains to get out of the utter mess that it is in right now and has been in for some time. I'll start off by answering at least half of your question directly. There is a part of me that almost, not quite, but almost regardless of who it is, I'm looking forward to change, because it's not so much the debt that actually bothers me so much anymore, despite the fact that there is $650 million worth of debt that is still on the club's books, that these Americans, the Glazer family, have gleaned God knows how much money out of paying themselves dividends over what is coming up for 18, 19 years of owning the club. There's zero sporting direction. That's what bothers me. I think even more now. I'm going to accept the fact that I have accepted I've been priced out. The last time I went regularly to Manchester United was before the Glazers took over, simply because the cost just of the ticket, let alone all the merchandise and the match day experience, rocketed up. Since I don't live in Manchester anymore, I'm not likely to go to many games, but the sporting direction of the club. Now, this is what this whole Jim Ratcliffe takeover has been sold to us around. He's only interested in the sporting side. We've been told, well, we know he is from the Manchester area. He says he is a lifelong Manchester United fan. Sheikh Jassim also said he was a lifelong Manchester United fan, and I don't think either should be doubted simply because of where they come from. But where we stand now is a year since strategic opportunities were investigated by the Glazers. And as soon as those first words were spoken a year ago, we should have known what was coming. They didn't say the club is for sale. They didn't say we're looking to sell. They're trying to squeeze every single little penny out of the club. And the fact that Jim Ratcliffe's initial bid was not for 100% of the shares, not complete ownership, and he scaled that down and been prepared to scale it down to 25%. That's the latest reports we've heard of shares. And 25% of shares is not the complete picture, because there are some shares that are worth 10 times more voting rights, and it has not been confirmed if the 25% that Jim Ratcliffe is prepared to bid for, and we're told the 25% is worth $1.3 billion. Is he going to spend that much money and not have a controlling interest in the club? We're told he's interested in building up the sporting side of things. He just wants to run the sporting side of things. Well, how can you if you don't control the purse strings? I'm sorry, but that's just absolutely nonsensical. We know full well the Glazers haven't a clue how to run a football club. They've got no interest in running a football club. They're interested in running a business. And they're very good at running a business, I might add. The commercial revenues have just gone through the roof. I'm not proud of that. I don't care about that. What I care about is the football. So, do I believe Jim Ratcliffe actually knows how to run a football club? He loves having his fingers in many sporting pies. We know that. He's been involved in virtually everything from cycling to sailing to Formula One and football already. So let's look at the football. Nice, a club that he has been running for a few years, fairly inconsistently, although they are doing well this season, admittedly. But the reports we've heard are that not the most efficient at running the football operations. He just simply wants to control things. How the sport turns out, I don't think really is his major concern. So what concerns me most is that we still don't have a clear picture. Whether you are interested in Ratcliffe or not taking over, whether you're interested in Dave Brailsford coming in with a mentality that simply won't work in football. I'm sorry, but he really needs to get real if he thinks, whether it is above board or not, a marginal gains theory just does not work in football. You need a lot more than just marginal gains. You need a clear direction. You need clear communication between the business side of the club and the sport. You've got to invest in the right players, the right manager. You've got to invest in the stadium. You've got to invest in the facilities. I mean, Old Trafford has just hosted its 2,500th game. It opened over a century ago, about 115 years it's been open. It's been redeveloped, but it's been added on bit by bit, a bit like a child building up with Lego. It has a lot of space. A lot of investment is needed. Now,
and that's what you said, Andrew. He basically, well, apparently all these things are coming out. There's lots of leaks coming out. Now, most of this information coming out, supposedly from the Rat, is from journalists who are sitting around thinking, what can we say now? What's the latest thing? We've seen how they've done with Den Haag. Den Haag was fired a week ago, then he's okay. He's hanging on to his, by his fingernails. All this nonsense, because whatever you write about Manchester United, it will sell. Liverpool less so, because people don't care quite as much. But if you write about United, it will sell. So he supposedly, according to the Daily Mirror, he's not going to invest in a new stadium. That's it. He's going to get rid of 7 players because he said that this was wrong, and he said that he had questioned all these different players, like he's going to kick out Anthony Martial and so on, and that's what he's going to do when he comes in. The man hasn't. I mean, if someone's talking about like I'm going to when you hear that about a club, when I get in there, I'm going to do this. It's almost sounding like he's either trying to A, drive down the price, or B, he's not interested at all, and people are trying to push him out. Because when players hear that, either from an incoming manager or from an incoming owner, they literally, the heart goes out of the team. So this is why, if he's such a lifelong fan, which I don't think he is, because last summer he was a lifelong fan of Chelsea, loved Chelsea. And he was going into carpet by Chelsea. So, there's too many questions about it. Andrew, on that, if he does come in, he's going to, have to try and put money in, and where that money is going to go, as we discussed before, it's going to just pay off debts or whatever it may be. So there's not going to be a huge boost like a kind of a Qatari coming in, just buying the club, clearing off the debts, and then lashing in $500 million for players. What do you foresee happening, and what do you believe should happen?
Well, realistically, what I think will happen is, as soon as I saw a change from the initial offer we read that Jim Ratcliffe's Ineos bid was for 69% of the club, I believe it was. As soon as it was scaled down to 25%, I thought, this is exactly what the Glazers have been looking for. 1.3 billion into the club, and they still control the place. That's what I think will happen. In fact, I think this is precisely what the Glazers were playing for all along. I don't think they have the slightest intention. Now, when I say the Glazers, we do need to be clear here. You've got Joel and Avram, who are interested in squeezing every penny out of the club, and they don't really want to sell. Their other siblings, there are 5 of them on the Manchester United board, and the others we're led to believe, and I think probably makes some sense, are happy to sell up. Because you've got to remember, they bought the club with borrowed money for a lot less than the $5 billion plus that both Sheikh Jassim and Jim Ratcliffe initially bid for the club were offering. So they could easily make a quick profit and gone. So realistically, I think what will happen is pretty obvious. The Glazers are getting exactly what they want, cash injection. It'll help sort out a few minor issues that they're not really interested in. They don't care about the stadium. It's irrelevant to them. And like you say, the brand is what they're interested in. Manchester United is the biggest, most solid sporting brand, I would argue almost sporting brand in the world, certainly football brand in the world. And that's what they're interested in. There's no way the Glazers are going to sell up. If they were interested in selling up, they could have done quite easily and got a good price for it in the last 12 months.
True.
So that's what I think will happen. What I think should happen or needs to happen, honestly, if there's going to be any change in ownership, it needs to be a clean sweep, a complete clear out of everything. And I mean everything. The business operations, the Glazers have, well, the commercial operations has admittedly been very impressive. They managed to strike something like 70 international major partners and more money from corporate earnings than most clubs can dream of. But realistically, it's the purse strings and the sporting direction and the sporting staff needs to be on the same page. Sheikh Jassim's bid, the Qatari linked bid, financially was an absolute no-brainer. Debt wiped off. He was going to put part of his bid was over $1 billion into infrastructure, specifically the training ground, the stadium, women's training facilities, which all need a huge amount of investment. This is just a very, very wishy-washy. This sounds awful, but $200 or $300 million means absolutely nothing into affecting how the football club is going to run forward. But the Glazers will say, "Oh, look what we've done! We've brought in more investment to the club." Well, $200 or $300 million does nothing now.
No, and he has no say. He's no say. Isolt, I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to ask the reverse question for Andrew. How happy could anyone be, apart from fans of other clubs in England, that this is going to happen? That this, person, this dodgy person, especially Dave Brailsford, landed in as well.
It's a minority shareholder buying into a club, so there's no real huge significance. The significance is the fact that he is a person who is known and a big name, because apart from that, this is someone buying a minority share where he has very little influence. The only influence he has is by potential of his name. Anyone else, if there was a 10 or 20% shareholder coming into any club, we wouldn't even be discussing it.
Yeah, that's it. Andrew, on that note, before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you, the whole Evan Ferguson thing, we discussed it before in relation. What's your take on it, and why are English people or English journalists so happy to sort of play that little game of trying to grab people in, especially Irish people?
It's very, very easy. Greed. It's what English sport has done for a long time. I mean, I thought, to be fair to Isolt, she made the
England as a nation, Andrew. England as a nation. That's what colonialism was all about. You're a greedy group of feckers.
I mean, I could try and argue against that point, but I'd be just going completely against my intellectual standpoint. Look, I mean, the truth is, all nations nowadays have changed how they look as nations, the fabric of them, the makeup of the cultures that make those nations nowadays. Every country in the world looks different than it did before. And I think the difference, the point he sort of made, the difference between stealing Declan or Damien Rice, for that matter, Harry Kane, Jack Grealish, and then Evan Ferguson, actually, I think there is a difference there. But the very first clip he played, I think, makes the most important point. Even though it was, at least on some level, a little bit of a joke that the TalkSport presenter was saying, "Oh, God, why don't you play for England?" The fact that that joke works is that there is this natural assumption that international sport is effectively a career advancement opportunity. And that, I think, is everything that is wrong with modern sport. When it comes to club sport, obviously, that is a job. I mean, however much people say I'm loyal to my club, I love my club, you can't blame anybody for improving their career opportunities. When it comes to international sport, it is just not a question. You represent who you are. I mean, it shouldn't be a choice. I mean, there are some people who do have a very sort of, I wouldn't say blurred lines, but have much closer connections to more than one nationality. When my daughters grow up to become international Olympic swimmers and tennis players, admittedly, they will have a choice to make. Do they represent Great Britain or Russia? But even then, I'd say, look, if Dasha says to me when she's 16 and Patrick Mouratoglou comes along and says, right, I want to train you for the next Open, but you've got to declare which nationality it's going to be. And she said, maybe I'll have more commercial opportunities if I represent Great Britain. I'll tell you, only if that is what you feel. Because to be fair, she is 50-50. But when it comes to choosing your country based on, I might win a World Cup more there, I actually lose respect for players who do that. I think that is dreadful. I don't respect players who do that. Even if people make a case for it, this isn't a club, this is your country. It's a different thing. So,
Yep. Okay, on that note, we'll wrap up for tonight. Thank you very much, Lisa Cody, Andrew Flint. I think
Thank you both.
We put the world at right, so thank you again, both of you. And of course, we'll be back next week with more Capital Sports 3.0. So I'm Alan Moore saying take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you all next week.